Byron Lewis Black spent more than 36 years on death row before being executed on August 5, 2025. His sentence was handed down for the murder of Lakeisha Clay, a 6-year-old girl committed in Nashville, Tennessee. The execution was carried out by lethal injection using pentobarbital at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. What happened that morning in 1988 inside the apartment on Wade Avenue left a family forever changed. This is the story of the crime that led Byron Black to face capital punishment. This documentary contains factual descriptions that may be sensitive to some viewers. It is presented with care, respect, and the intention to inform. There is no available information about Byron Lewis Black's childhood, adolescence, or family background. His personal profile before the crimes remains largely unknown. However, his violent history began to surface in late 1986. In December of that year, Black carried out an attack that foreshadowed the coming tragedy. He shot Benny Clay, Angela Clay's ex-husband, during an argument involving her. The attack was merciless. He shot at Clay's vehicle, then hit him in the right foot and left arm with one bullet lodging near his collarbone. Clay later testified that Black chased him while continuing to fire and that he survived only because Angela intervened and drove him to the hospital, where he remained hospitalized for 7 days. Black was convicted for this attack and sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the particular condition that he was allowed weekend work release furloughs. During this time, he was in a romantic relationship with Angela Clay. Angela, mother of Latoya and Lakeisha, was separated from Benny Clay, though according to Benny, he and Angela were attempting to reconcile. This situation caused tensions with Black, who had shown himself to be extremely jealous and possessive. Angela's mother, Amelia Bell, confirmed that the relationship was troubled. Black had already demonstrated threatening behavior. He broke Angela's apartment door in 1987 and on several occasions warned her he would not let her be with anyone else. 3 days before the crime, neighbors reported seeing him banging on doors and windows in a rage. These behaviors formed a pattern of violence that would become key in the judicial proceedings. The murders occurred in the early morning of Monday, March 28, 1988, in Angela Clay's apartment located at 11001 Wade Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Angela was 29 years old. Her daughters, Latoya, 9, and Lakeisha, 6, lived with her. Lakeisha had just turned 6 20 days earlier. On Friday, March 25th, Byron Black was released on a weekend furlough. He was expected to return to prison Monday afternoon. During this time, he had direct contact with Angela and the children. On the night of Sunday, March 27th, Angela left her shift at Vanderbilt Hospital at 10:00 p.m. Her sister, Lynette Bell, picked her up. At the meeting point, they encountered Black. The girls had spent the day with Lynette but chose to return home with their mother and Black. They visited the home of Amelia Bell, Angela's mother. According to Amelia's testimony, Black left in his own vehicle while Angela and the girls departed in hers. A few minutes later, Angela returned to retrieve a forgotten iron. That was the last time Amelia saw her daughter alive. At 11:20 p.m., Angela made a phone call to Lynette, the last recorded contact with her. The next day, Angela did not show up for work or respond to her family's calls. Growing increasingly concerned, Amelia and Lynette went to her apartment. Angela's car was parked outside. The blinds were closed. No one responded to the knocking. At around 9:30 p.m., they called the police. Officers found no signs of forced entry. One officer climbed through a window and spotted a child's body lying in a pool of blood in the children's bedroom. The apartment was then secured and searched. In the master bedroom, officers found the bodies of Angela and Latoya. Angela lay in bed. She had been shot in the head at point-blank range between 15 and 30 centimeters while she slept. Death was nearly instantaneous. Latoya was wedged between the bed and a dresser, partially on the bed and partially on the floor. She had been shot in the neck and chest and died between 3 and 10 minutes later. Both victims were covered with bed sheets. Lakeisha was found face down next to her bed in the second bedroom. She had 2 gunshot wounds. one to the chest and another to the pelvic area. Forensic analysis revealed that she tried to fight back and moved around after being shot, leaving blood marks and fingerprints on the bed rail. She died from internal bleeding between 5 and 30 minutes later. The weapon used was a large caliber revolver, likely a .44. No shell casings were found at the scene, confirming the use of a drum-fed weapon. During the inspection, officers discovered that the only fingerprints on the phones belonged to Black. 2 on the hallway phone and 1 on the kitchen receiver, which was located in the master bedroom. Additionally, neighbors reported hearing loud noises like hammering between 1:00 and 1:30 a.m., coming from the downstairs apartment which belonged to Angela. When first interviewed by police, Black cried briefly but soon became emotionless. He initially claimed he had left Angela and the girls at her mother's house and slept at his mother's place from 11:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. However, witnesses stated that he was only seen at Charlotte Walden's house between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. In a second statement, Black changed his story. He admitted to returning to Angela's apartment that night, finding the door ajar and the bodies inside. He said he panicked and didn't tell anyone, stating, "I slept at least 7 or 8 hours on my mother's couch after seeing the dead bodies of his girlfriend and the girl." He attempted to shift suspicion to Benny Clay, but when confronted about the weapon used in the previous shooting, Black admitted it had been a Magnum .357, which he had later thrown into the Cumberland River. Additionally, he turned over a .22 caliber revolver to police, claiming it was his only firearm. A ballistic report later confirmed that the bullets recovered from Lakeisha's body, from Latoya's pillow, and the one that had injured Benny Clay in 1986 all came from the same weapon, a .44 caliber revolver. Black was arrested on April 21, 1988. In December, prosecutors announced their intention to seek the death penalty. The trial began on February 27, 1989. Black presented an alibi and character witnesses, including family members and others who spoke of his prior behavior, fatherhood, and religious conduct in prison. Nonetheless, on March 8, 1989, he was found guilty of all 3 murders. Prosecutor Eddie Barnard called the case the most atrocious triple murder a jury has ever seen. On March 10th, Judge Walter Kurtz sentenced Black to death for the murder of Lakeisha, following the jury's unanimous recommendation. For the murders of Angela and Latoya, the jury did not reach unanimity, resulting in 2 life sentences. He also received 15 years for burglary and 5 years for each of 2 counts of criminal use of firearms. After his conviction, Byron Black spent more than 3 decades on Tennessee's death row. During that time, he filed numerous appeals before state and federal courts, arguing, among other claims, that he had an intellectual disability. In 1991, the Tennessee Supreme Court rejected his appeal with a split decision, 3 judges in favor, 2 dissenting. The dissenting judges argued that the aggravating circumstances were not sufficiently proven. On February 24, 2020, the first execution date was set for October 8th of that same year. However, it was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Later in 2022, a new execution date was scheduled for August 18th, but it was once again suspended due to irregularities found in the state's lethal injection protocol. Black continued his appeals. In 2022, in a rare move, Davidson County District Attorney Glenn Funk sided with the defense, asserting that Black met the criteria for intellectual disability. However, Judge Walter Kurtz rejected the claim, and in June 2023, the Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the sentence. During his years in prison, Black received medical treatment for various conditions, including 2 hip replacements and schizophrenia. He also had an implanted defibrillator. In July 2025, his attorneys requested that the device be deactivated before the execution, arguing it could interfere with the process and cause unnecessary suffering. The judge granted the request but stated he had no authority to halt the execution. The date stood. The night before the execution, Byron was given his last meal. He had requested a pizza topped with mushrooms and sausage, donuts, and butter pecan ice cream. On the morning of August 5th, 2025, he was led into the execution chamber. He was already strapped to the gurney when the curtain was raised at 10:31 a.m. A sheet covered his body, which was standard, but in this case it was pulled unusually high, even covering his hands. He faced the witnesses, but when asked if he had any final words, he simply replied, "No, sir." He did not address the victim's family, who were seated just feet away, nor did he offer any apology. Witnesses reported clear signs of distress, heavy breathing, restlessness, and confusion. It appeared, they said, that he didn't fully understand what was happening. A final microphone check was conducted. His spiritual advisor stood by his side, touching his cheek, praying and offering quiet words of encouragement. She told him to focus on his breathing. Byron began to sigh and breathe heavily, almost panting, as if fear was overtaking him. As the drug began to flow, he opened his eyes, looked around, and raised his head, clearly unsettled. Witnesses described him as more agitated than expected. At 10:33 a.m., he was heard groaning. "I can't do this," he told his spiritual advisor. "This is hurting so bad." She leaned in calmly, unable to help, and softly whispered, "I'm so sorry." Then she continued praying. A few moments later, Byron raised one hand for the last time, then went still at 10:36 a.m. By that point, the full dose had been administered. A mandatory 5-minute waiting period followed. At 10:43 a.m., Byron Lewis Black was pronounced dead. He was 69 years old. This case is filed, but your comment could reveal new evidence, and with a like and a subscription, you'll help uncover new cases. For now, this story is filed. Choose the next case file and continue the investigation.